Welcome to The Truth is Funny, Shift Happens, with Colette Marie Steffen, inspiring shift on Transformation Talk Radio, gracing the airways every Wednesday at 8 a.m. Pacific since 2013. And we're live on Facebook, providing nuggets of wisdom, tales from the vector, and energetic upgrades to lift you, shift you, and empower you to ride the wave of infinite potential. Do you have a problem? It is never what you think it is. Logical questions require creative solutions. Colette is a leading expert in the field of quantum energetic transformation. Learn to identify the usual energetic suspects and major accomplices to unveil another layer preventing you from living your authentic desires. You are a blank canvas. May as well paint a rainbow. We'd love to hear from you. Call 1-800-930-2819.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for joining me this morning on Wednesday, October the 13th at 8 a.m. Pacific time in my neck of the woods. Wherever you are in your neck of the woods, it could be afternoon, late afternoon, evening, or morning if you're on the other side of the world. Welcome, welcome, welcome. This is so great to be with you. Welcome to Caleb Matthews' new house, my new pad. So behind me, I am in my study room, my living room. You can see the books behind me, my shelf, my platform pulpit there, and the dream sign up there behind me. I am cozy and nestled into my new house. Since the last time I was on the air, I think a month or two ago, I was in my old place, but here I am. So for those of you who have tuned in with me in the past, this is going to be, hey, Caleb, how's it going? And catching up with me from that point. For those of you that are new, welcome. My name is Caleb Matthews. I am a certified dream consultant and spiritual insurgent with Encompassed by Dreams. That is my consultation, motivational speaking, and really spiritual consultant business. And that is what I love. That's my passion. Daytime job. I work for a telecommunications company here in Canada. That's my 9-to-5 job, but my main passion is Encompassed by Dreams. So let's get right to it. We've got a lot to dive into today on The Truth is Funny. I am very thankful, first of all, as we get into this topic, just for this platform. I want to just give a shout out to my friend Colette Mary Stefan. I know she'll probably listen to this later or hear through the grapevine through Jessica, my amazing assistant today, and also people on the air here with Transformation Talk Radio, Dr. Pat, everybody. Thank you so much for this opportunity. I do not take this lightly to have airwaves, to have this platform to be able to speak to you, encourage, uplift, and inspire the audience, and especially in times like these, there's so much turmoil, there's so much uncertainty, and really many of us, we're looking for clarity, we're looking for those answers, and I love being able to just come here and just submit what I believe that my higher power, the Creator, Yeshua, Yahweh, is saying in these times, and really to you to communicate that message. So let's get right to it. We are going to get into what is truth. So this is a really, really juicy topic. What is truth? The war on reality. So this is a big one. There's a huge cosmic battle shift between light and darkness for the war on what is reality, what is truth. So I'm going to read the excerpt from the scripture verse that I provided from this famous interaction between Pontius Pilate, who is governor and ruler of Judea as a Roman. Roman occupied Israel over 2,000 years ago. And his interaction, Pontius Pilate, one of the most powerful people in the land, with Jesus of Nazareth, who was radical, mystic, revolutionary, the insurgent of the land of that day, and really bringing a different message. Repent, for the kingdom of God is near. And that was a direct threat to Caesar, to Rome, and really because Caesar believed that he was the King of Kings and there couldn't be any other kingdom other than the Roman kingdom. So here you have Pontius Pilate wanting to uphold Caesar's law and Roman rule, and really Jesus, who is bringing forth this another kingdom, this supernatural kingdom that was manifesting itself on the earth. So here is a famous interaction that is one of the most famous encounters of history that is just the buffet of theologians and historians and people who love looking back at the history texts and books. This was a real interaction about what is truth. Very deep topic. So we won't have time to get into all of that today, but we're going to get into my portion of what I believe is being communicated to us through that and what we can learn from it. So John 18:37-38 in the gospel say, "You are a king then," says Pilate. Jesus answered, "You say that I am a king. In fact, the reason I was born and came into the world is to testify to the truth. Everybody on the side of truth or reality," that's another definition, "listens to me." "What is truth or reality?" retorted Pilate. With this, he went out to the Jews against and gathered there and said, "I find no basis for a charge against Jesus." So that was a simple question that Pontius Pilate asked Jesus of Nazareth over 2,000 years ago in one of history's pivotal moments. That encounter, that radical encounter, the war of reality between the reality of Rome, that was the fist, the iron fist that ruled the world. The entire world, cloaking the world, was the Roman Empire. And the empire, not the empire, the kingdom of Jesus, the kingdom of heaven that was bringing a new message to the earth. Throughout ages, mankind has been at war. We have been at war and have waged war on defining truth. Every movement, every large movement, like the civil rights movement and the abolition of slavery and women's suffrage and rights to vote, and all these different movements has been birthed out and will continue to be birthed out of this war on reality of defining truth. What is truth? What is reality? As we're going through the times we live in, it's easy to look back at the past and say, aha, okay, they got it. Oh, how could they miss that? How could they not see what the reality was or what the truth and what the morals were? But when we're in the middle of the quagmire, in the middle of the muck, in the middle of trudging through really these mixed messages through the airwaves, it's hard to be able to see clearly sometimes of what really is reality, what is truth versus what is really media truth, what is government truth, what is the truth that the powers that be and the planet we live in is saying is truth, but may not necessarily line up with what is heaven's truth, what is the ultimate truth, what is morality, what is justice, what is really the truth of what's going on. So we must put on heaven's lenses through communication with God, communication through the Creator, communing with Christ, communing with our higher power, communing in that place of, okay, what is going on? What really is going on? What is the bigger picture? We talk about this throughout all the conversations and topics I've had over the last few years on this show. The truth is funny. Multiple perspective advantage. It's a joyous truth. So just give yourself a nice smile. Multiple perspective advantage. It brings a smile to my face because that is the bigger picture, the bigger reality of what is truth. It's outside of what is media defined truth and what is heaven's truth. It really is a battle for the airwaves. So I'm gonna bring some examples to you, and then we're gonna learn and read into what is the definition of reality. So in history, we talk about historical examples. Okay, what is this war of reality, Caleb? What is this battle for truth? What are you talking about? We know through these examples that there are clashes throughout the ages that really was a war, a constant war, an everyday war, minute by minute, hour by hour, week by week, month by month, year by year. I'm a huge history buff, and I always like to bring historical examples to my conversations, to my thesis, to my presentation to you, for the audience to follow along, but also for us to learn from history, and then we can apply it to our own lives. So in World War II, when the Allies were fighting the Nazis, Nazi Germany in the 1940s was on the brink of defeating the Western powers that be. Every country was falling to the Nazi blitzkrieg, one after the other. Hitler was marching all the way across Europe, and he was on the doorstep at the brink of England. England was days away from falling. Historians will say that England was days away from falling. So Hitler had the front against the English, just across the English Channel, that were the Battle of Britain. There was a huge fight over the skies with the Luftwaffe against the RAF. Just epic battle that was on the cusp, on the brink. England, they held firm. Winston Churchill's like, we shall never surrender. We shall fight them on their landing grounds, fight them in the air, fight them on the beaches. We will fight. We will fight for this reality that we're not gonna let the fascist Nazi flag fly over Europe. We're going to fight for this reality that we're going to fight for the freedom of Europe, the freedom of the known world. So the Allies were in a tough place because they were outnumbered, outgunned, and they were quickly losing the war, and the war was turning on them. And the Allies believed that the Nazis, the Germans, had a way of communicating with their soldiers, with their commandos, with their infantry units, with tank divisions, with their Luftwaffe, with all their communications. Talk about airlines, airwaves, and communications. Throughout their entire communications through Europe and the world was a communication network that would relay information, that would relay commands to the front lines. And this is the way that the army would communicate, and they would get their plans out there and get them out there quickly. So the Allies knew they needed to do something to turn the tide of the war, to be one step ahead of the Germans, one step ahead. So they concocted a group that would, their sole purpose and their sole goal and their mission, based on The Imitation Game, really great movie with Benedict Cumberbatch. Alan Turing and this group of other really brainiacs and wise guys and gals, their whole goal was to break Enigma. So to break the Nazi code and win the war, to get into that place, to break it. So they ended up breaking Enigma, and that was one of the turning points of World War II with the Allies. And slowly but surely, they turned the war against the Germans. And even up until the very end, the Germans and Hitler and the Nazis, they continually pressed the propaganda to their people that they were still in control, that they were still winning, even all the way to the end when Hitler and his high command died in the bunker. They still communicated this false reality, this false truth, this message that they were winning and that the Third Reich would last into thousands of years. So there's an example there of here's the truth of what was happening. The war was turning, Enigma had been broken, and the Nazis and the Germans and the fascists were still standing their ground. That spirit, that reality, that, just think about that for a minute. That stubborn, staunch, arrogant spirit was standing there saying, we are not going to back down. We are going to spread these propaganda and lies even to the end. That was not truth. The truth is that they were losing. So let's go on to this next point. William Wilberforce in the 18th century, he was one of the most famous abolitionists of slavery. Him and his group there, they made their life goal to abolish slavery and the slave trade. And one of my favorite stories was when he was looking for support in the court, in Parliament, to be able to overturn these laws. Some of his senators would have these tea and biscuit parties, and they would just dine and wine the upper crust and the elite and the high end white people. Where the reality was only white people could have all the privileged things, and black people they weren't human. They were not human. And which is why many white people had no conscience to be able to own slaves or to be in the slave trade or to profit from the slave trade, because they were benefiting while others weren't, because they weren't human. Anyways, Wilberforce, he was able to sponsor one of these such tea parties with the women, the men who were floating along one of these boats in the harbor one day. And the senator that William Wilberforce was drafting to his side in Parliament stood up on the end of the boat and said, I'm not the only sponsor, I must confess. There is another sponsor who is responsible for this tea, this dinner today. And then he pointed up to the mast of a boat that was moored in the harbor, and there is William Wilberforce standing on the mast. And he explained to the audience and to the crowd, this is the ship, the Madagascar, where over 4,000 slaves were just carried to Jamaica from Africa, and over half of them died of malnutrition, starvation, and it was terrible. But the smell and the aroma was in the air. And that's what I want to get to, is that he forced the people, the rich, white, elite, upper crust people, to put the handkerchiefs away from their noses and to breathe that disgusting, rotten, foul smell in of death, the smell of death, and say, breathe it in and remember that God created all men equal. What a radical thought. That's an absolutely radical thought in that day and that time period, for saying that God created all men equal. The reality of the day and the reality of the time was that only white people with money, especially the middle class and the upper class, were considered human. No, black people weren't human beings. You're saying that these people are human, William? Yes, he was. And he devoted his life's work. He gave up a life, his whole life, to seeing this slave trade abolished, this demon of slave trade abolished. And eventually he did, but it took him a long time, a lot of persistence, a lot of really knocking on that door and just really looking to push that door down. So there is a few examples. We talk about the enigma, the code that the Allies broke of the Nazis. They broke that reality, that present reality of the Nazi war machine marching through Europe. And then they brought that deeper reality of breaking the code because they were guided by God, because they were guided by a plan to be able to overcome evil. And really the same thing with William Wilberforce as well, too, that he was inspired by the Holy Spirit, by God, him and his companions, to illustrate the truth that all men were created equal. So that's why he showed those rich, snooty white people the ship, the Madagascar, so that they would never forget the Madagascar. They would never forget the reality that God created all men equal. Fighting for heaven's justice on earth towards all men having the right to freedom, the right to equality, the right to life. That is a greater reality and a truth than just the natural world. To wake up the people for what is going on, the call to focus on reality. So here we go. So where do our choices come from? Our chosen reality come from? So we're gonna get into this topic here for just about 10 minutes, and then we're gonna take our only break of the session because there's so much to get into. And I want to invite you, if you have dreams, because I want to make sure near the end of the conversation, dreams, if you want interpreted, to send Jessica a message or be standby for callers. I'll have Jessica give me a message in the chat if we've got anybody who's got short dreams that I can do some interpretation for at the end if time permits. But we've got a lot of stuff to go into here. So if we're good, then we're going to keep on going here for another 10 minutes, and then we're going to do a break. So where do our choices for our chosen reality come from? That's really important. I'm going to say that again. Where do our choices for our chosen reality come from? Chosen reality, what we're choosing to invite into our senses, our sight, our ears, our taste, our smell, our touch. What are we giving precedence to really what we focus on, we empower. What we look at magnifies, it grows. So that comes from two different places. Government, so the laws, media, medical science, spirituality, faith, or family history. That's a big one. And the other is our higher power, God's spiritual principles, morals, and ethics. We understand them through the life of Jesus, his example and how he solved and broken humanity's problems. We must determine which of these will have our highest devotion. So it's a choice. Every single day is a choice. So how do you say that, Caleb? What does that have to do with me? I'll tell you exactly what it has to do with you, what it has to do with me. Every single day we have a choice with this smartphone. We live in a world of technology. We live in a world where media is surrounding us every single day. The airwaves, we talked about the airwaves before, Enigma, breaking the Nazi code. I'm not saying that smartphones or computers or email, tablets, any of those things are evil necessarily, but we can become its tool if we allow those things to control us versus allowing these things to become our tools. And so what are we giving precedence to? When we wake up in the morning and we have coffee or we have breakfast, is our first inclination to grab the phone, look at what's going on and what's screwed up in the world and what fear is being preached in the news and the airwaves, how many deaths happened in the hospitals or how many people are sick or what politician made this law or what happened here or, oh my goodness, like I've got things to do and I'm short on bills here and there. And those things are there's an importance and there's a place for them. I'm not saying put our heads in the sand like an ostrich and say, oh, nothing's going on, everything's all fine and we got all white picket fences and rainbows and sunshine and leaping like a gazelle in the fields of freedom. There's nothing to see here, people. But that's not what I mean. I'm saying there's a place and a time for keeping ourselves educated and informed, but we cannot allow our gaze on heaven, our gaze on our higher power, our gaze on God, our gaze on Jesus, our gaze on the Spirit of Yahweh, Yeshua, El Shaddai, Elohim, the Ancient One. We cannot allow our focus on heaven to be clouded and to take second place to the precedence of the world system, because we cannot love the world or things of in the world, because the love of the Father, the love of heaven, the love of God is not in our hearts. If our devotion and our focus and our passion and our intensity and our worship really is placed on the world system and looking to man, looking to mediators, looking to these personalities, looking to the Pontius Pilates, looking to the Roman system for our answers. If that is our main focus, then we're going to fall short of our goal, our inheritance, our reality. We must determine what our devotion is, because the government realm, the laws, the media, medical science, the family cults of, oh, this is the way our family's always done things, or this is the way that it's always been done within our family lineage of our belief systems, or medical science says this, or the media says that, and the numbers say that, and the government says this. Well, those things, they are a branch shoot. They are only the supporting cast. They are the pieces. They are the chess pieces on the board of the world. And the one that stands over top of the board, the one that has the bigger picture, the one that sits in the heavens, where we are seated in heaven with Christ in heavenly places, where there's that door that talks about in Revelations 4, come up here and I will show you things which must take place after this, a door standing open in heaven. Jesus is there. God is there. God is there, seated upon the clouds, sitting in the heavens and laughing. We talk about the truth is funny. God, in his abundant joy and his wisdom, he's in the heavens and he's laughing really at the schemes of man and of the fear systems and of the false systems that are trying to really control people. These systems have been allowed for a reason, to make us stronger. We can either complain about what's happening, or we can rise above these systems and say, you know what? What is truth? What is reality? This war on reality. I'm going to go into a higher reality, heaven's reality, and follow that invitation. Today is an unprecedented rise. It really is, in totalitarianism rule. Is this true love? All these restrictions, all these rules. Oh, you're not loving your neighbor if you don't do this, if you don't comply with this, if you don't submit to this. Love does not force people to do anything. And I will say that without getting too political today. There is no love in forcing someone to do something against their will. Human beings were created with a free will, mind, will, and emotions. You have that. I have that. All of us have that. That is the truth. That is our reality. Our reality is that we have a choice. All men were created equal under God. In Galatians, it says, there is neither Greek, neither Jew, neither male nor female. All are one in the kingdom of God. All men have value. Everyone, all men, all women, every single person on this call, wherever you are right now, I speak to you and I say this as we go into our break in the next few minutes. You have value. You are no lesser than anybody else. You are no higher than anybody else. I am no lesser. I am no higher just because I've done this, just because I've done that, just because I have this passport or I have that passport, or just because I've done this procedure or that medical procedure or that one. That's what I will say about that without getting flagged here. But I will say is that there is nobody who's better or less than anybody else. This is a segregating lie that the governments of the world have really joined their hands together and wanting to segregate people. And it's no different every single day, every single movement in history. We look back at it. I just went through all of it. The Nazis thought that the Jews were less people than the Nazis. If you weren't in the Aryan race, if you weren't white, if you weren't without defect, if you weren't in a perfected social class, if you weren't a full-blooded Nazi German, if you were any defect in any way, if you're a gypsy, you're a Jew, or you're homosexual, or any of that, if you didn't fit the mold, you were discarded, you were thrown away. And we know what happened in history. We know the concentration camps, and we know that there is the annihilation plan of that. We know that. We know that in the civil rights movement, that Rosa Parks and Martin Luther King Jr. and Malcolm X and all those people, they had to fight amongst a movement of people in the United States in the civil rights movement for their rights as people, as human beings under God. All were created equal under God. And Rosa Parks decided one day she was not going to give up her seat in the bus to the white person. She was not going to be treated as trash, as second class. She was first class. She is first class. That was the truth. That was the reality, is that heaven has no skin. Heaven has no boundaries. heaven has no culture except for one culture. There is one culture in heaven. That is the kingdom of light. That is heaven's culture. And that is what Rosa Parks stood for, Martin Luther King Jr. stood for, all of them stood for. That's what Harriet Tubman stood for when she decided one day she was going to run free. She was going to run north. She was going to run away, and she was going to lead others to freedom as the Moses of her people, to break out of the slavery in the Civil War. And she was going to lead people to freedom through the Underground Railroad. That's what she fought for. She fought for freedom, not the color of her skin, but the content of her character. That's what she fought for. Yeah, that's just, let that sink in for a minute. That's a lot of bam, 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 bam. That is really, this is it. All created equal under God. That is the truth. That is the reality. That is the war that has been fought through history. That is the war that is being fought and will continue to be fought. And now we've got this segregating line between those who have done and those who have not. That's what I will say about that. You can fill in the blank and you can do the rest there. I will not tolerate that. And God will not tolerate that. And light will not tolerate a segregating between people. That is the plan. That is a plan of darkness, to divide people. But the plan of light is to unite, is to be under one accord. That is really what it's all about. It's our connection for our higher power, and really all men being created equal under God. Every single is. The truth is, God's heart and purpose and free will, equal rights for all mankind, is seen in the life of Jesus. He is the highest truth, chosen reality, heaven's reality. That is God, who is pure light, and there is no darkness in light. So, to recap what we went into before we go into break in the next few minutes here, we talked about the beginning. What is truth? Pilate's interaction with Jesus. What is reality? From that example, from that scriptural example of over 2,000 years ago, we brought forth the examples from history for the William Wilberforce and the abolition of slavery in the 18th century in Parliament in England, and the ship the Madagascar and his interaction with the white staunch snooty fluties, and force him to breathe in that breath of being reminded that people were created equal, all were created equal. And then the Nazis, their code being broken by the Allies, Enigma being broken, and then going into the different examples of history, the civil rights movement, Europe under Nazi control, and then all these different examples that we went through, and so showing that all men are created equal. There is no segregation in God's kingdom, and ultimately light. There is light. There is God's light. There is heaven's light. That is the main dividing line, guys. There is no segregation in heaven. This is a reality. This is the reality of the kingdom of heaven. So think about that as we go into our break here. And then as we come back from break, we will get into the next portion of, okay, so what? So what now, Caleb? We've talked about everything that's here. You've talked about engaging our senses and what are we focusing on when we empower. We're going to go into providing the source and that solution on the other end. So stand by with us. Thank you so much for tuning in, and we'll be right back. All right. Good to be back with you guys. This is awesome. So we're getting into now really the reality of the open heavens of Jesus, and really the greater truth, the greater reality than the present reality. So we talked about the airwaves, the battle for reality, the battle for truth, the battle throughout the systems of man throughout history. How there has been war, there is war, and will continue to be war over this war on reality of truth, of really what is truth, defining that truth and walking in it, and standing for the reality that all men and women are created equal under God, and that there is no segregation in God's kingdom. There is no segregation in God's kingdom. And so we have to turn that into, okay, how do we define that? How do we cross the principalizing bridge and apply that to our own lives so that we can walk this out in our own circles? Because there's so many different things vying for our affections, for our attention. There's a lot of stress, there's chaos, there's uncertainty. There's a lot of weight on our shoulders and your shoulders and mind and hearts. And so I want to be sensitive to that. I want to be sensitive to what's going on within the audience that's here today and those who will listen to this topic and this conversation and be encouraged by it and inspired by it. Because I've got what I have prepared here today and continue to share a little bit here, but I want to also speak directly to your heart, where you're at, and also invite God's light to shine upon you and lift you into a higher altitude of discovering your true purpose, of why you're going through what you're going through, why you're here, and just really what God's plan is for you, what Christ's plan is, what Yeshua's plan is for your life. So, truth is, God's heart and purpose and free will and equal rights for all of mankind is his plan, as seen in the life of Jesus. This is the highest truth. This is a chosen reality. All must yield to it. So there's the reality, there's lesser realities, and there's the highest reality. The reality is we live in a world that's forever changed as of the last couple of years. There is different curveballs thrown our way where there's changes and there's things that we cannot go back on and are altered, and they're forever shifted and changed and morphed into what we see today. There's a lot of chaos. There's a lot of things being turned over. But, when death comes in many areas, when the concluding and closed doors of seasons come in some places, that opens the door to new life and new growth and new light into other places. So one season give way for another. Truth is not science. Science is an earth plane reality as God created order and physics. But God is genderless, exists before the creation of the world. So he's got both male and female components to him. God has both. So newsflash, God has both male and female components to him. He is the father of lights and father of eternity, but he's El Shaddai. He is the nurturing God. He is like the one that broods over his creation. He lives outside of boundaries, out of time and space. This is the reality and the truth. God is light. He is pure light. So the truth is that we've been raised with Christ in the heavenly places, set our reality on things above. This is what Paul, who is a seer and a mystic who walked in the desert for many years, after he became indoctrinated with all of his Pharisee and Sadduceeism and Judaism, he had to unlearn a lot of the religion that tied him down, because he thought he was doing God's will when he was following the letter of the law, but he had to be taken into the wilderness. He had to be taken into a different time capsule and really into a different reality outside of the reality of just the hamster wheel, the world system. And he had to come into really detaching and deplugging from the matrix and being plugged into God's light. And Paul's revelation in Colossians says, being raised with Christ in heavenly places, set our reality on the things of heaven, where Christ sits at the right hand of the throne of God. And Jesus is the ultimate breaker. What do I mean by the ultimate breaker? Well, I believe that Jesus was a real person who walked the earth. And also in the scripture verses that he was the great high priest who made a way into the heavenly places by breaking through into the heavens, by passing through the heavens, by really breaking the veil of the temple when he died on the cross, and really made a way through his mystical and gorgeous and pure light pathway into the heavenly places. And as he broke through the heavenly places, he made a way into the heavens so that we could follow him into the heavens and see from a higher altitude, see from a higher perspective. So we have a great high priest who has passed into heaven. Let's hold firmly to the faith we profess. What is this truth for? What is this truth for? How do we wage war, and how do we fight for our true reality in our own lives? How do we fight for reality? This is going to be a divine paradox for you, but we have to labor to enter into his divine rest. Yeah, there remains therefore a rest for the people of God, because God had once, there was a time, one day a week, where he ceased from his works to rest. It says that in creation, that on the seventh day that God rested. And so a lot of things has been done through that over time and over religion, over the time period of human history to make it a complete religious protocol of having a Sabbath rest and making it into a bunch of rules just to get into rest. And that kind of defeats the purpose. Rest isn't necessarily a day. I would recommend that you set aside a day, but it doesn't have to be a day. Especially if you're a truly busy person, it can be a few moments, a few minutes. It can be an hour, a chopped block of time of taking into the reality of stepping back of this is the reality of the open heavens. This is the highest reality, is focusing in on the light of Jesus in the Holy of Holies, in the tabernacle, in the heavenly places, in the Father's house, and getting above the noise, the chaos, the world governments, the media, the science. The science is correct. That's man's science. That's man's interpretation. That's the skewed filter of man and man's media numbers and man's math and man's stuff being thrown our way and bombarding our senses. And really, it is a war on reality, the reality of what is going to flood our senses, flood our eye gates, flood our ear gates, flood our lips, flood our conversation, flood our time. I want to propose to you and present to you, as we've gone through this entire conversation now over the last 35 to 40 minutes, that there is a reality. There is a throne zone. There is a place of rest that is above this chaos, this grid line, these airwaves, this system. And there is a place of rest in God's heart that is inviting you right now, inviting me to be able to ascend higher, ascend the hill of the Lord with clean hands and a pure heart, and really stand before him, stand before God, stand before the Creator, and really standing and looking into the face of pure light, of pure acceptance, of pure truth, of pure reality, and knowing that we are qualified, that you are qualified, that there's no prerequisite to have to perform or have to do this or have to do that, or anything that religion or rules or anything that somebody would have put on you in times past, in years past, and as a child or growing up of, oh, this is what you have to do to qualify to gain God's acceptance, or to gain acceptance from your Creator, to gain acceptance, or this is what you have to do to be acceptable. Some of you were raised in great homes with great parents like myself. Some of you may not, were raised with very poor parenting or very poor spiritual parental figures or mentors. Some of you may have had great upbringings in faith and spirituality, and some may have had very dysfunctional ones where there was a lot of abuse attached to religion and to abuses done within the institutional system and the institutional church. I can really relate to that, and it's been a battle. Talk about a battle for reality and a battle for truth. It's been a battle I've waged war on my whole life. My parents have our whole life. Our family has our whole life for this generational blessing and generational inheritance, this generational truth that all human beings were created equal under God, including being able to walk and worship God and worship Jesus and worship the Creator in the cool of the day without religious mediation, without hierarchy, without rules, without dominion, without government control, without institutional control, without religious control, without the control of man, but just really walking face to face with God, really in that mystical way that our forefathers, our ancestors did, like William Wilberforce, Harriet Tubman, Rosa Parks, Martin Luther King Jr., Martin Luther, the Allies that got on their knees and they prayed literally for the liberation of Europe. All of these people, men and women, young and old, they all had a part to play. They all tapped into that anchor, that source, that greater light, that greater truth. This is the true light that was coming into the world. That's what this Christmas season, I know we're only a few months from that now, and we celebrate Advent and we open up the scriptures, and we, even for those of us who don't barely even open up a Bible, we read about the how Jesus came to the earth and was born in Bethlehem, and we're a few months away from that now, but it seems really relevant, even more so, that he came to bring peace on earth, goodwill to all men. And he appeared to the lowliest of lowly shepherds in the stable in Bethlehem, in a place where nobody would look for a Messiah. Everyone was looking for a Messiah that was going to be in the tabernacle, with all the Pharisees and Sadducees, and they looked for a Messiah that was going to be leading as a military leader on a horse and leading the liberation of Israel from Roman occupation. That's what a lot of the religious people and the governmental people in Israel thought, is that Jesus was going to be the great conquering hero that was going to liberate them in the outward world from all of Roman rule. And they were sorely disappointed and sorely mistaken when Jesus was not here to lead a physical revolt against Rome. He was here to bring a convergence, a meteor-like collision with earth, of heaven invading earth, of the kingdom of light. That was the reality. When Pilate asked Jesus, what is truth? Jesus said, everybody who listens to me listens to the truth, is on the side of truth, on the side of reality. And that reality is the kingdom of light. So I've got some blessings here for you at the end. I think if there's any dreams to be interpreted, you can always email me later at encompassedbydreams@gmail.com. So I'll just say that again, encompassedbydreams@gmail.com. I'll write that in here. If you have any short dreams you want interpreted, I'll give that out to my assistant here, and just Jessica, and really, but I really want to go into speaking to your spirit and ministering to you, because I feel like there's a lot of people on this call, myself included, and those who will listen later, who really need just a spiritual blessing, and really to be able to come up higher, come up and invite, and that invitation to the heavenly places, the higher reality, that higher truth that's higher than the media, higher than the government, higher than the science, higher than the darkness, and really get into that place. So there's a few things. I'll get into the blessing, but as I get into that, the closing remarks. One of my favorite heroes was in a colonel in the Union Army called Lawrence Chamberlain, and he fought in the Battle of Gettysburg. I had the privilege of going to Gettysburg when I was 16 years old in the natural with my dad as a field trip, an assignment for my homeschooling social studies, my yearly quiz, my yearly test. And so I got to go and see the war reenactment for the 140th Battle of Gettysburg reenactment with all the actors, and walk amongst the camp where they all had the different uniforms, and talk to the different hired actors and actresses, and including Chamberlain himself, even though it wasn't Chamberlain, it was the guy who was playing Chamberlain, that went to the battlefield, walked the ground, and walked that earth that was for thousands of people paved with their lives in the Battle of Gettysburg, just fighting for that reality that all men were created equal under God, and really just fighting for freedom between a clash, this civil war. And it's just mind-boggling how that happened. And there's still wars being fought today, just in a different sense. But Chamberlain at Gettysburg, he was talking to his Union troops, and he was like saying to the Union Army, what we're fighting for is that all men have value. No dividing line between slave state and free, all the way. That's it. What we're fighting for is that all men have value. That's it. Everyone has value under God, under the sight of heaven. And so I want to invite you right now, as you're sitting in your living room, maybe you're in your vehicle, maybe you're listening to this in your backyard, maybe you're listening to this as you're in you're running, going for a morning run or an afternoon or evening run. And so if you can, if it's safe and you're not driving, or if you're driving out loud, follow with me, but put your hands on your eyes or on your ears or on your heart, and really just follow along with me. Close your eyes or keep them open. It's really your choice. And I want to bring this home here, and this blessing from God, from Jehovah, from Elohim. So let's invite the Spirit of Yahweh, Yeshua, Jehovah Shalom to overshadow this blessing. I bless you with the blessing of Jehovah Shalom, the blessing to rise above the hopelessness, despair, and the fear of the unknown that our culture has imposed upon you, upon us. I bless you with God's kingdom of peace and his Son, who is the Prince of Peace, the wonderful Counselor, the mighty God, the everlasting Father. the Prince of Peace. I bless you with the ability to turn your gaze away from government, tyranny, and the media and onto Jehovah Shalom, the Lord our peace. God has not abandoned you, no matter what your circumstance looks like. You are valued, precious in His sight, and you are surrounded by heaven and those who have gone on before you. You are surrounded by love, future, and a hope. My friends, you need to go to this place every day. I need to go. We need to go to this place every day. Go up higher into the cloud of His knowing, where you are loved and cherished. And this is the food that Jesus offers you that endures to everlasting life. His love. This is the reality. This is the truth. I bless you to come up here as the Creed song sings. Come up and take you higher to a place where all men see, to a place with golden streets. I bless you with the truth of heaven and the truth that you are free and that there is no dividing line between you and true freedom. That is where Jesus is. That is where God is. That is where the Father is. That is where the Holy Spirit of life is. I bless you to rise above all the cares, all the busyness, all the attention, all the things clamoring from the world system, and to abide under the shadow of the Almighty. I bless you with protection and the angels to follow you, heaven's angels and escorts to protect you in this world and your family and your health. I bless you with the reality and with the truth and the understanding and the revelation that you are not any less than anybody else. You are not disqualified. You are qualified in His presence. Just breathe that in. Take a couple breaths in, the breath of God. I bless you with the truth, the joy. Heaven sees you. Heaven will never abandon you. God will never abandon you. Jesus will always be close to you. The Father of lights and of eternity will be with you where you are and never leave you or forsake you. So bless you with peace amidst chaos. So that's what I had prepared today. And I want to thank you for tuning in, rejoining the world, whether it was in North America, Europe, South America, Africa, Southern Hemisphere, Asia, the islands, Australia, New Zealand, wherever you joined in from. Thank you so much for joining in with my talk here today, The War on Reality, What is Truth, with Caleb Matthews of Encompassed by Dreams. Thank you for joining us. Thank you to Jessica, my assistant with Transformation Talk Radio. Thank you to Dr. Pat and the Transformation Talk Radio, and Colette Mary Stefan, my friend. Thank you for this platform, this honor, and this privilege to be able to speak to your audience and your listeners. May you reap 100-fold from all the kindness that you've given to me as your friend. So blessings to you guys. Have a great week, and I will talk to you again later. Jehovah Shalom gives you His peace. Blessings to you. Bye for now.
You've been listening to The Truth is Funny, Shift Happens, with Colette Marie Stefan, gracing the airwaves every Wednesdays at 8 a.m. Pacific since 2013. And we're live on Facebook, providing nuggets of wisdom from her book, The Truth is Funny, and 3-card consultations from Tales of the Vector Oracle. Colette has poured 14 years of energetic upgrades into this deck, and we can all predict what will happen if you continue in your wanton ways. Check out how you can become an official modern-day Dragon Sayer by visiting thetruthisfunny.com. Energetic upgrades to lift you, shift you, and power you to ride the wave of infinite potential. You are a blank canvas. may as well paint a rainbow. We'd love to hear from you. Call in next week, 1-800-930-2819.